Hello, everyone. We'll wait a couple of minutes and allow folks to drift in. But I wanted to welcome you all to our call tonight. We would love for you as you come in to connect you with other people in APJ that might be in your state. So if you can just type in the chat who you are and your name and what state you're in, that will help us do that. And just what we're going to do tonight is we're going to learn more about who we at APJ are, what drives our work. We're going to introduce you to some new members of our board, and we're going to update you on the advocacy work that CPJ and APJ have been partnering on, as well as let you know about some plans we have for the upcoming months leading into the 2024 election year. So following all of this, we would love to hear from you. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll hold them until the end after we go through the presentation today. So first of all, I just want to give a brief update about who we are. So most of you, if you're here today, you've been part of what we're doing. You know that we are the action arm of CPJ, a 501c4. We help Christians increase their political engagement in ways that are not beholden to either political party. We're helping Christians get engaged by extending their influence beyond their vote through meetings with congressional staff, letters to Congress, voter guides, and more. And we draw on the principles of our shared Christian faith to work towards innovative and collaborative solutions to issues that have been bogged down by partisan polarization. We focus on issues that the Center for Public Justice has already done significant work on. And if you're not familiar with the Center for Public Justice, you can check out their website. The link will be in the chat. And we usually work on issues where they've done a lot of work, not only developing principled policy solutions, but also developing a vast network of relationships with diverse constituents. And if you know anything about the Center for Public Justice, you know that they've developed quite a reputation for being a convener across significant difference. So that's the heart of who we are. The way that we do our work is by organizing folks into local, primarily state-based coalitions. We do our work at the federal, state, and local level. Sometimes we organize state coalitions to do federal level advocacy. Sometimes we organize state coalitions to do advocacy at the state level for an issue that's particular to something going through their own legislature. And we hope to continue to develop the opportunity to do even more localized engagement as well. Alongside this kind of organization, we're also seeking to equip Christians to engage faithfully around these issues. So we're in the process of developing a video curriculum that will help equip Christians to know how to learn about issues in their area, how to think in ways that are faithful to the heart of Scripture and not tribal in their outlook, and in a way that really mobilizes people to act on behalf of others around them, to act not only in what is in their best interest, but to act for the good of their communities and for the flourishing of all. So that's a little bit about who we are. And now I want to introduce you to our team. We have several board members who've been with us for a while. And you can see those on the slide here. So I'm one of the co-chairs of the board. I co-chair this board along with Art Hooker. Claire McWilliams has been on our board for a while, and she's also on the board of the Center for Public Justice. We have in our bylaws that we will have at least one overlapping board member with the Center for Public Justice so we can maintain a lot of strategic synergy. Charity Warrenberger, Jerry Hooker, all of these folks have been with us for a while. And then we have our wonderful advocacy intern, who's more like a staff person than an intern, Chandler Robinson, who makes everything work with what we're doing at APJ now. But one of the things that we wanted to do tonight was introduce you to some new members of our team. And we're really excited to have some new folks join our board. And instead of having me introduce them, I'm going to have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are and why they're excited about their work at APJ. Now, just a little bit of, just a note here, when you hear from Christy Wazinski, you're going to hear that in a recording rather than live. She had surgery this morning, and although she made a valiant desire to be here in person, we decided to spare her that, and we recorded her before she had her surgery today. So first of all, I'll introduce Sanchez Fair. Sanchez, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're excited about APJ.
Hey, yes, again, my name is Sanchez here. I am native of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been 12 years. Over the last 12 years, I have worked primarily in the Christian space, pastor. I am what they call the bridge worker. So I bridge Christians and denominations and people groups together, and falls right in alignment with APJ, which is why and that's to develop authentic and meaningful relationships around advocacy. Advocacy goes a long way, and I'm excited to dive deeper to what that means for this organization and what it means for our community here in Charlotte. So I look forward to meeting and getting to know more of you as time goes.
Thanks, Sanchez. And now we're going to play the video from Christy Wazinski. And for those of you who don't know, while this is getting started, Christy is a long-time supporter, and she's been involved with the Center for Public Justice really for decades. She most recently directed a Christian school in the Pittsburgh area, and now has joined our board. And I'm going to let you hear from her about why she did that and why she's excited about that.
I was really, I think, enticed by the possibilities of Christians being able to work out their salvation in politics. I continued to follow it, and then understood the shift to the emphasis on research and collaboration with CPJ, and then got very excited when discussions started a few years back about starting up APJ, which would have local groups that would be advised, for actions that they could take. And I do think that this is a particularly ripe time right now in the American political scene for a grassroots movement. And I think we have the possibility of coordinating with not just other believers in Western Pennsylvania, but also other groups that are interested in multifaceted, diverse groups coming together for political action. I'm excited. I'm really grateful for APJ and the things that are being done nationally to encourage these local groups.
Great, thanks, Christy. And now, Julie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Julie Peterson. I live just outside of Washington, D.C. and have lived here for in the D.C. metro area for many, many years. I currently work in the private sector, but continue to struggle with the injustice of the world. A long time ago, I lived in Nairobi, and I had, small children come and put their hands on the windows of my car when I was going back and forth to work. And I couldn't sleep at night. And I kept thinking, I had to do something that was to contribute towards a more just system. And found ways to do that in Nairobi. And the same way is true now. And I feel in where we are living now, as it's more citizenship, has much greater responsibilities than simply voting, and wanted to get more involved. I'm a past board member of the Center for Public Justice, so deeply trust and believe in the foundations and the perspective in which this organization is pursuing justice, and really excited about the opportunity to more actively engage in local community work to pursue some of the foundations that I believe in.
Great. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to hear a little bit about the advocacy work that the Center for Public Justice and APJ have been partnering on. If you haven't met her yet, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from Maddie Allen tonight. She's the advocacy manager at the Center for Public Justice. And in this position, she really coordinates the planning, implementation, and evaluation of all aspects of CPJ's organizational advocacy, particularly with all of the coalitions that they build. She's passionate about loving her neighbor well by advocating for them. If you get to know Maddie, you will see that passion come through in about a second. And before joining CPJ, Maddie worked in maternal health advocacy. She graduated from Covenant College with her bachelor's in community development and has a master's in public health from the University of Virginia. And like I said, if you have not yet had the opportunity to meet her in person, the next time you're in DC, stop by the Center for Public Justice offices and meet her. But Maddie, let us know what's going on with advocacy.
Yes, hello. I'm so thankful that for everyone who's able to join us for tonight. I really appreciate. I know Tuesday nights are not always free, so I'm just so thankful for everyone who took the time to join and hear a little bit more about APJ and advocacy really as a whole. As Michelle said, I work at the Center for Public Justice as the advocacy manager there. And one of the reasons that I am so passionate about this work is because I started in a place very similar to most people who were just passionate about wanting to help their neighbor and love their neighbor and wanted to know how to do that well. And so thankfully that grew a lot more and more. And now I get to work at a systemic level that I love, but I cannot overstate the importance of doing work just as a citizen to advocate well for your neighbors. You often know your neighbors the best and know their struggles and their needs, and what often people in DC that work at a high policy level forget. And so I want to just emphasize the importance of that role as a citizen and the power you really do have as an advocate. So thank you for wanting to learn about how to use that power well and how to help your neighbor. But CPJ's advocacy work covers many different issues, but I just really wanted to focus tonight on 3 different advocacy efforts from this last year, that these 3 different kind of buckets of advocacy are areas in which APJ has been directly involved, or where there's been really great touch points for advocates to be directly involved in the future. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order of like what is on the screen, so I apologize. But the first one I actually want to talk about is the work of Families Valued. So Families Valued is a program of CPJs that conducts research, convenes partners, and works to educate citizens. The program orients its work around 2 core principles: that families are the foundation of healthy communities and societies, but then also that all work, including family caregiving, has inherent dignity. It's through these principles that has motivated CPJ to promote paid family leave and pregnancy accommodations, maternal health access and family-oriented benefits, and then also a childcare ecosystem that serves America's diverse families well. So over the last year, there have been 2 different opportunities for APJ and its advocates to be directly involved with impacting legislation and policy for the lives of families. So in last December, Congress was voting on a key piece of legislation for working mothers called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. This policy was aimed to help pregnant workers have access to basic accommodations at work, like bathroom breaks or a stool to sit on, while also providing basic protections for religious employers and small businesses. There were several key states, for example, like North Carolina, where advocates were actually able to sign on to letters to their senators or meet with their senators' offices, which APJ was able to help set up those meetings. And they could talk about why it's important to people of faith, to families, to mothers, to fathers, to aunts and uncles, to make sure that pregnant workers are supported, that people can still provide for their families while pregnant and be safe and be able to carry a pregnancy to term, or not have to experience undue pain during pregnancy just so that they can keep working. And so the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was actually passed at the end of 2002. 2022, not 2002. And this is where the role of advocates was really key. It was these meetings that swayed senators who were really strong holdouts. They weren't sure if they thought this was a piece of legislation that they wanted to pass, that actually changed their opinion. Senator Tillis in North Carolina was one of those. He was originally a no on the PWFA, and then he actually ended up switching his vote and became a real leader on the importance of this policy. And so that was a really big success for families, but also a great opportunity for advocates to be involved. Another exciting way that CPJ and APJ were able to partner with the work of Families Valued was with the expansion of access to healthcare for postpartum mothers in Texas. Anyone who has given birth or has walked beside someone who has given birth knows that the recovery process is very long, and that postpartum is a particularly vulnerable time in life. The United States has one of the highest maternal mortality rates of any comparable nation. We are not keeping track with countries that are our allies and ones that we normally track along with similar economies. And so this is a huge issue. We need to figure out where things are breaking down in our healthcare system that's not protecting mothers, that's not protecting children. And one of these issues is that postpartum window. That's where we're seeing a lot of problems. We also know that the health of the mother is one of the greatest predictors of the health of the child. So if we really want to protect children and keep families stable, we need to be deeply invested in the health of mothers. So in Texas currently, or this would be before this legislation was passed, mothers only had access to about 8 weeks, 2 months of Medicaid before they were kicked off the system. 8 weeks for someone who's had a C-section is nothing. 8 weeks for someone who did not have a C-section is also not good enough. And so this was a huge issue that we were able to partner with many advocates in Texas to write letters, to get out there to talk to their representatives, to let them know that this was an important issue to people of faith, to churches, to families. And thankfully, that expansion was passed, and now mothers in Texas have postpartum mothers have up to a year of Medicaid expansion in Texas. So these are just, stories from the last 12 months where literally just everyday citizens have been able to partner by either signing on to letters, having meetings with offices, talking to each other, sharing their experiences, I think is also a powerful form of advocacy. I think listening can be a really powerful story of advocacy, to sitting on a prayer call and hearing about people's experiences with childbirth, raising children in this current economy with so many of the struggles that they have in the workplace. And so Families Valued continues to focus on this work. We are also very much focusing on paid family leave and the progress that is coming in the next few years in the United States. One great way to be a part of this work is that Families Valued hosts quarterly tech studies and calls. Our theme in 2023 has been focused on a theme of abundance to guide our work, coming from the 23rd Psalm, in which the Bible paints this image of, you set a table before me, my cup overflows. And what does that mean for families? What does it mean to have families that are living abundantly and have not just enough to survive, but more than enough? Families Valued has already hosted 2 conversations and calls this year with authors Kendall Vanderslice and Kat Armis, who, in addition to being wonderful authors and theologians, are also advocates. They are people who have met with other representatives, have been passionate about the work of policy and how their faith is interactive with that. There's actually this Thursday, Families Valued is hosting another tech study with author and theologian Sharifa Stevens to talk about what does it mean to use your own abundance and tenacity to be a good advocate in your community and shape the lives of the families that are living in your community. And so that work continues, and I invite all of y'all to partner along. And I'm so grateful for the way APJ has helped connect people to meet with their representatives to talk about core issues for families. So the next topic that I want to talk about is the work that we do on juvenile justice. Juvenile justice can be a complicated thing to talk about because one, we're talking about children and families, and that's already a sensitive topic. It's hard, I think, for a lot of us to imagine children being involved in a justice system that is not designed for them. The justice system was not designed for children to ever be involved in it, but there are experiences and occasions in which that is the necessary pathway for children. But we know that children are precious and that we do need to protect them. And so we've come to a place where we're thinking about juvenile justice, where we know that government has a calling and a responsibility to protect its society and to protect family and children. So what do we do when we have children who are getting involved in the justice system, when we have children who are who have made mistakes, who come from hard situations, and who have gotten involved in crime, delinquency, and what are the pathways forward there? And so we want to make sure that our justice system is equitable to both of those outcomes, that we are protecting communities, we have a high view of safety and security, while also having security and safety for our juveniles, even though that they have made mistakes in their life. And so I think one of the key states that we have focused on in this issue is Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has one of the strictest systems for juveniles. So their current system that they use involves two, I want to call them policies that they have shaped that we think that there needs to be some restructuring for. For example, juveniles in Pennsylvania, no matter their age or the crime that they have committed, they can be tried directly in adult courts. This is a practice called direct file, and it is where it's solely up to the district attorney that decides, and the prosecutor that decides if they're going to be tried in adult court and sent to adult prison, or if they're going to be tried in juvenile court first. The normal system that we've seen many other states do is you're tried first, a juvenile is tried first in juvenile court. And then depending on the level of the crime, it is determined also on their age, their remorse, the support systems they have. It's determined if they would be then tried in an adult court or sent to juvie. This is one thing that we know that children do not thrive in prisons. We know that they don't thrive in adult prisons, that they do not, does horrible things to a child's brain to be put in solitary confinement. And that's often what has to be happened when children are put in adult courts and adult prisons, because they need to be separated from the rest of the population. And so these are some of the core issues that we are trying to act on. Right now in Pennsylvania, there is several pieces of legislation. So over the last 6 months, CPJ and APJ have been a member of the Pennsylvania Youth Safety Coalition, which was started by Pew Charitable Trust when the Pennsylvania legislature created the Youth Safety Caucus, because that really is the goal here, is youth safety. What does it mean to create a system in which both youth can be safe and protected while also being held accountable? So CPJ was invited to stand with the sponsor of the Youth Safety Caucus at a press release for the launch of the Youth Safety Caucus because of CPJ's involvement in educating faith community leaders on juvenile justice issues in the past. CPJ has for a long time acknowledged that this is a key place for faith leaders to stand up and talk, because they often know what's going on in their communities better than anyone. They know these youth. They know their families. They know what issues are going on in their communities. They also sometimes make for the best mentors. They make for the best court advocates. They know, I think Christians, we're very aware of what it means to balance mercy, grace, but also accountability. And so CPJ has really been involved a lot with thinking about helping faith leaders think about this, but we also want to be involved with helping policy leaders on how to think about this. So the really goal of this coalition is to help encourage champions for youth safety in the Pennsylvania legislature. One of the reasons that it's so important to have advocates here is that, this seems like a no-brainer. Of course, we want a system where children are protected and safe, and nobody wants to see children in prison. But the reality is that there are some real brokenness in the system. There are lobbyists who fight and argue for, a child detainment centers that charge the state insane amounts of money to hold children in offsite detention centers. And so they have a lot of incentives actually to keep children in the system. They don't have incentives to keep children out of the system. They don't have incentives to use diversion methods instead of detainment methods. And so those are the people who are lobbying the Pennsylvania legislators and those representatives. So we wanted to offer a counter voice to that. And so since the creation of the Youth Safety Caucus, several pieces of legislation have been circulated in the Pennsylvania House and Senate that CPJ and APJ have been able to support. One of the biggest ones has been House Bill 1381, which would standardize and increase diversion practices across the state of Pennsylvania, while ending the practice of prosecuting children in adult courts without a hearing first in juvenile court, which is the process known as direct file. These bills also require out-of-home placement for only the most serious cases and require more frequent reviews so that children can stay in their communities. Often, children are taken out of their communities, and it is so much harder for families to have stability and security. Children honestly need to be able to see their parents, siblings, their mentors in their life, their sense of community. But when, Pennsylvania is a huge state, often detention centers are far away from their families, from their communities, and places where no one can visit them, where their parents who, potentially are both working cannot go, drive 6 hours to go visit their kids. So I think that that's one area that's really important to think about. This bill has passed out of committee and it's set to be brought to the floor in the House in the next month. But there are deep partisan divides on this issue. Republicans, honestly, many representatives have even told advocates they support this bill. They support seeing families staying together. They support wanting to try juveniles in juvenile court, which was designed for juveniles, instead of an adult court, which was never designed for juveniles. But this is a bill that's been pushed by Democrats. And so Republicans say, well, we don't want to see a Democrat win. And this is one of the areas where I think it's really important for advocates to step in, because advocates can go in and say, look, this isn't about being a Democrat or a Republican or which party you are. This is about my community. This is about the kids that live next door to me who skipped school and were picked up by the cops and don't have a record, but now potentially have to pay a fine of $1,000 that they don't have. And now because they can't pay that fine, they're going to be tossed in juvie. That's an area, and people can relate to that because they say that's a ridiculous system. That doesn't make sense. Of course, a juvenile who skipped school once can't pay an $1,000 fee. But we have to remind legislators sometimes the real personhood behind this instead of the politics behind it. And so I think that's a great opportunity there for advocates to step in and remind them. There's several other bills. Senate Bill 170 is also helping streamline a process of expunging juvenile records so that justice-involved youth are able to gain employment and further their education and apply to housing as young adults. One of the really hardships here with juvenile justice is that, like we said, like juveniles, these are people that are justice involved. They have made mistakes. They did not always make wise choices. But they are also juveniles, and they often, have had their eyes opened and wanted to change their lives, but then because of their record, it has become so much harder to get accepted to a college, to further their education in any way, shape, or form, to stay in school, to get a job. And then when you can't further education, you can't gain employment, you can't have good housing, you're just so much more likely to fall right back into that cycle. So it's so important that we have a much better process for expunging those records, especially for juveniles who have really turned their lives around. There's so many key issues to this coalition, but the main focus is increasing diversion, ending adult prosecution for kids, limiting out-of-home placement whenever possible, ending fines and fees for children, and limiting school referrals to the juvenile justice system. Thankfully, that many of these issues are addressed in the legislation that's been presented in the last several months, but the coalition is still encouraging more comprehensive bipartisan legislation from the Youth Safety Caucus. This is an issue that is very much alive right now. We have so many advocates in Pennsylvania that I'm thankful for, and Pittsburgh, that are really passionate about this. So if you are in Pennsylvania, there is much work here to be done by talking to your legislator, by talking to the people in your community to make sure they know what's going on, because many people just do not know that a 12-year-old could be tried in adult court for, a low-level crime. Something that should never be. So it's really important on an education side, advocating in that way. It's important to keep an eye out for any emails from APJ flagging key times to sign on to letters to legislators, or potentially even schedule a meeting with yours to hear what they're thinking about. Are they a part of the Youth Safety Caucus? Are they how are they planning on voting on some of these bills? There's bills both in the House and in the Senate. So this is such an important issue, and I think especially as people of faith, we really need to think about the juveniles in the system and how they're being impacted, and how we can come alongside them to advocate and help them. I will also say that in the end of November, CPJ will be launching our Juvenile Justice Toolkit, which is created in partnership with Community Connections for Youth. This toolkit provides practical resources for understanding juvenile justice for churches, small groups, families, and individuals. The toolkit really walks readers through the background of how we got where we got with juvenile system, and the current problems and potential solutions to the incarcerated and system-involved youth. This toolkit launch will be actually a part of CPJ's juvenile justice convening, which gathers faith partners from all across the country to discuss pathways forward and address key issues that stakeholders are currently facing. There's just so many wonderful thought leaders that will be on this call who really are paving a path forward for justice-involved youth and helping people figure out how they can best partner beside these youth to create a much more just society for them. So I'm sure you will see the link to that registration for that in the November through APJ's email. But I would love if everyone could join, because I think it will be a great time of learning. And then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about Fairness for All. Fairness for All is a piece of legislation that has been floating around for the last several years. It is really a work of bipartisanship that is great and exciting, but it is an effort of both a pathway forward in a very polarized society between religious freedoms and LGBTQ issues. And so we've seen such stark divides, but CPJ and APJ, we have a very pluralistic approach in believing that we can find a way forward, a path forward that assures that both religious freedoms are protected and the dignity of image bearers are protected as well. And so Fairness for All is a piece of legislation that's trying to get at that, make sure that LGBTQ groups are protected from violence, from hate speech, from employment discrimination, while also ensuring that religious employers, churches, and religious groups are also protected to still live out the way they feel called to live out and follow the same standards that they have in place, especially true for Christian colleges and universities, make sure that they are protected as well. One of the ways that Fairness for All kind of shifted in the last year was we had the Respect for Marriage Act, which was a huge effort from CPJ this last year. The Respect for Marriage Act was originally a piece of legislation that was a response to some remarks made by the Supreme Court about potentially overturning the court case that legalized same-sex marriage. And originally, Respect for Marriage Act was written as a response to that to codify same-sex marriage, and it had no religious freedoms language in it at all. And of course, this was a major issue. It did not discuss what this would mean for religious organizations, for churches, for religious employers. And so CPJ and several other organizations had the opportunity to kind of partner alongside this and make sure that religious freedoms language was put into it. And it really was a work of bipartisanship. And it was a great example of how people of faith can come together with people that they don't always agree on every issue with, but still want to say we can live together and live together in a just way. And the Respect for Marriage Act was passed. And you often don't hear in the news mentioned a lot about the religious freedoms language, but that religious freedoms language has actually already protected several Christian colleges in major court cases when religious freedoms issues were raised on college campuses because of the strong religious freedoms language that was in the Respect for Marriage Act. But since the Respect for Marriage Act was passed, it already had a lot of the language in it that was in Fairness for All. So now Fairness for All is being slightly rewritten, but will be coming forward and over the next year. But we're currently doing the work of building relationships with leaders of religious groups on all sides of this issues who have not been in support of the Fairness for All approach and a very pluralist approach. But this is a great time to really, again, kind of show like the real people behind this, of like wanting to make sure that we can live together as neighbors while respecting each other's diverse views. And I hope to see much success in Fairness for All in the future. But we are figuring out what that looks like as legislation is being rewritten, but hopefully we'll have more updates in the next few months. And I think that is the majority of updates from me, unless Michelle tells me I forgot anything.
No, that sounds great. We might talk about a couple of other things when we look ahead at the coming year. But thanks, Maddie. That was a great overview. And as I said earlier, part of what we do at APJ is mobilize the kind of work that Maddie's talking about. When we know that there's a bill maybe in a state or in Congress that needs advocates, we ask for people to sign letters, or we ask for folks to meet directly with their congressmen. And just a note on what she had to say about the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Because I live in North Carolina, I was in that meeting with Senator Tillis, and his staff at the time that we had the meeting was completely unaware of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act coming. They didn't realize the implications. He's a pro-life senator. He didn't realize the pro-life implications, and we were really able to have a great conversation and introduce their staff to something that hadn't been on their radar. So we look for opportunities. We can't always plan in advance and know ahead of time when they're coming, the way Congress moves, but we're thankful for them and thankful for Maddie's work helping to pave the way so that we can come alongside. But the other piece of what we're trying to do is equip folks to really understand more deeply what it means to love their neighbor through politics, to seek justice in a way that's not tribal. And one of the things we've been working on, as I said earlier, was this video curriculum. So I wanted to show you a trailer that we've produced. So Art Hooker on our board is, he's not only a videographer, but he is specializes in building movements and helping people tell their story, which is exactly what we want to do here at APJ. So we're going to show you this trailer, and then we're going to have Art tell you a little bit about our vision for engaged justice and how we envision it being used.
But we're also seeing a growing wave of a new demographic. The AJC reports of the 75,000 voters who have registered since the November election, most of them are under 35.
Data shows young people between 18 and 29 contributed 20% of all votes in Georgia. That's higher than the national average of 17%. The under 30 group gave President-elect Joe Biden a lead of 58% to President Donald Trump's 39%.
9/11. Katrina in 2005, the Wall Street collapse of 2008. You go to coronavirus, which we're living through right now. Those types of experiences have really created a lot of doubt in the minds of millennials about the power of government and about the power of governing.
I think to engage justice as a Christian is to take what you know and you've loved and been given, really start living that out for others in a way that kind of makes you sweat.
Justice is righteousness. It's doing the right thing.
Justice is things made right, things being in the place that they were created to be in. It's the work of getting those things back in order.
I think faithful public engagement is listening well to the people around us and the communities around us, choosing to engage in those conversations, even though they could be difficult.
Engaged justice is meant to draw you together to discuss the curriculum so you can start acting.
I think it's possible, and I think it has to start with one-on-one conversations and starting right where we are instead of looking at the giant polarized issues right now, but starting at a lower level, having these conversations with one another.
So not only will this curriculum help you engage with your politicians, but it can definitely make a difference in who could be elected, and that's really exciting to think about.
We do live in a divided kind of cultural context, right and left, liberal, conservative. This curriculum gives us an opportunity to step back and think a little more broadly in ways that are a little more in keeping with what it means to be a disciple.
So it reshaped our conversation from just partisan party banter back and forth to actually begin to think together.
All of the preparation, the facilitation and work you do culminates in an actual real life in-person meeting with an elected official to advance or advocate for a particular policy. This curriculum is teaching us more that in order to be good stewards of the earth, then we have to engage.
It pushed many of us to think about how we view politics through the lens of religion, and specifically as Christians, what had influenced us, what had kept us from getting engaged, what drove us to be more engaged.
And so I just highly recommend this to anyone and everyone who calls themselves a Christian. To walk through this curriculum is a life-changing experience, because you can't look at the public square the same way, you can't look at God's mission in the world the same way, you can't look at your fellow Christians and their political beliefs the same way.
All right. Well, I'm so excited to be engaged with Engaged Justice. Engaged Justice is a unique sort of opportunity for us to be able to show people the tools. So we have Association for Public Justice, which is the action arm for CPJ. And I think the best way to describe what we're doing with the curriculum for Engaged Justice is it's giving everyday people the opportunity so that they can also have some of the tools. And so we're doing Engaged Justice is really built off of the political discipleship, and we're basically taking the political discipleship curriculum from CPJ and making it more accessible for everyday people that may not have really, to be candid, the luxury that we have to be people who work in this field or have the time to actually think or the desire to study the details of policy. And so what we hope to achieve through Engaged Justice is to give people the tools, everyday people the tools. So as we go into this this next cycle, as we go into a lot of the, as we operate this more polarized environment, what would it look like for everyday people to be able to engage in this work, utilizing the tools from CPJ over the last 3 decades and the recent work of APJ. So with that being said, that's all I want to share. And if Michelle has more to share about that, I can. But I'm looking forward to for us to share our next iteration of this with the group.
Thanks, Art. Jerry Herbert on our board has also really been coming alongside Art to develop this. If you guys know Jerry, he's spent his life teaching a lot of these things to college students. And now we're really trying to merge, as Art said, a lot of this content for a broader audience. and also use it as a movement building tool to get people excited about the work that we're doing. The last thing that I wanted to do tonight before we take any questions that you have is tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing for this coming year. So with Congress being in the state that it's in right now, we're not anticipating that a lot of legislation is going to be moving anytime soon. And certainly it's not going to be moving through the House anytime soon. But there are some key places where we may need advocates to get involved. One thing that you might be aware of is that, and Maddie was mentioning the great work that CPJ and APJ were able to do for the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. That legislation is now in the rulemaking process, and CPJ has submitted a comment about that. It may be that as that rule is coming out, that we need more folks to weigh in on the decisions that are being made about the implementation of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. There may be an introduction of something like Fairness for All. That probably wouldn't come until sometime next year at the earliest, but stay on the lookout for that. And there's also rulemaking around a lot of other religious freedom related issues. And normally organizations, lawyers are the types that submit comments and things like that, but occasionally it's really helpful for advocates to do that too. So be on the lookout if we need you to do that as well. A lot of the work that we do, as we mentioned, is organized around states. And I'm gonna talk now about our effort to really push into this election year with doing a voter guide for the first time. It's going to be a small effort localized in states where we already have active coalitions. We know for sure that we're going to have voter guide efforts in Pennsylvania and in Virginia. Pennsylvania, that effort's going to be led by Christy Wazinski. And in Virginia, Jerry Herbert's going to be leading that effort, hopefully with some other young adults in Virginia. And then we are hopeful that we're going to have a voter guide effort in North Carolina as well. And the way that this is going to look, it's not going to be an all-issue voter guide. We're really going to focus on those three areas that Maddie talked about: juvenile justice, family supportive policy, fairness for all, along with electoral reform. I think it's hard to talk about any of these issues with things being as stuck as they seem like without talking about electoral reform. So all four of these things are going to be on the table. And what we're going to do is mobilize our state-based coalitions to do research about what's going on at their state and local level in all of these areas. We'll provide research about what's going on at the federal level in all of these issue areas. And then we're going to coach and train these coalitions to go ask candidates at every level that's appropriate, given the issues on the table, to ask candidates what they think about these issues and how they plan to vote, and will they support the kind of policies that we think will lead to the flourishing of our communities. So that effort is going to start in earnest in January with the research on the issues. Then we're going to publish all of the information we get back with APJ branded material, and that will then be a voter guide that people can take and use to talk to their fellow Christians, the people in their community, and say, hey, have you thought about considering these issues when you vote? And this is how these candidates think about these issues. And though we're small, we're not assuming that we are going to have a huge impact in moving the needle in any of these elections, but we think that the mobilization around this will help put these issues on the radar of people who are running for office in a way that may really catch their attention. And who knows who the next advocate for any of those issues is going to be as we have these candidate level conversations. And also, it provides such a great opportunity to talk to people in our community about the issues that matter to us. I don't know about you guys, but I live in a place where during election season, I have people knock on my door. And I had in the last election, I had a guy that was running in the Democratic primary for an open house seat in my area, knock on the door and ask me what issues matter to me. And I asked him, do you think there's any hope that ranked choice voting will go anywhere in North Carolina? And we had a great conversation about it. Sadly, he said, no, there's no chance. Nobody's interested. Democrats aren't interested. But it was a chance for me to tell him that that mattered to me. And that was just a single conversation with a door knock. But with published material where we've done research, we can expand and multiply those kind of conversations so that the issues that matter to us, the issues that we're working on, get in front of not only potential candidates, but people in our communities as well. And so this is a way that we're hoping to really build our movement and to start gathering more advocates into the advocacy that we're doing. So I'd be happy to take some questions about that in a minute. But just to spotlight some of the work that we're doing in the States, we're going to have a video from Christy Wazinski again, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the work that Maddie was telling you about earlier in Pennsylvania and her effort to organize folks to get involved in that state.
Yeah, especially here in Pennsylvania. I think a voter's guide is going to be key. I'm glad to be part of that because I do think that APJ's emphasis on learn, pray, act, that learn piece is crucial. Most of us don't prepare for elections. I think APJ activity here could help people prepare and go to the polls or send a mail-in ballot if you're old enough to do that, to need to do that. But you are armed with information so you can make good choices. And that is such a service, the voting public. And I think it helps people find other potential APJ members. Just finding out now, I think the political climate is so divided that diverse groups of believers could really bring healing and hopefully intelligent voting, to the election in November 24. So, yeah, we don't even think about justice and advocating for justice for families so that communities can be strengthened. This is such a restorative effect. I mean, it's just the whole thing is so much a working out of Christ's kingdom, being light and salt, not just trying to get a voice for Christians, but to do good things that maybe nobody else is even thinking about very much.
Thanks, Christy. We're going to take questions now. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And while people are thinking about their questions, I'll just tell you, one of the best ways to stay up to date on what we're working on is subscribing to our newsletter. We try to get that out every month. You can follow the Center for Public Justice and APJ on social media. And we're really looking to build our social media following at APJ. So that'll be up in the chat in a minute. And we would love for you to follow us, and not just follow us, but when we post, to repost us so that others can learn about the work that we're doing. And also, one of the things we found is that when we have advocates, when we're looking for people to sign onto a letter or to meet with Congress, we would love for you to be able to invite your friends to that. I had a woman one time who's a young mom. She works full time. She doesn't have time to come to a lot of meetings. She probably doesn't read the newsletters she gets most of the time. But when I asked her and sent her an email and asked her to sign on to a letter on an issue that I knew she thought was important, she said, "Thank you for making this so easy for me to get engaged politically. Otherwise, I just don't know how I would find the time." So for those of you who are really involved with this and who are really passionate about that, think about other people in your spheres who may want to get engaged, but just don't have the opportunity to do the kind of legwork that you may want to do to get up to speed on an issue, and how you can make it easy for them to get engaged. And that's what APJ really seeks to do. So I don't see any questions in the chat. I'll wait a couple more minutes. The last thing I want to say is that most of what you've seen tonight could not be possible without Chandler. Chandler is our advocacy intern. We pay her for a few hours of her time every week. And not only does she make the inner workings of APJ work, but she's actually been engaged in interfacing between APJ and the coalitions that we have in the States. And that kind of direct coaching, the direct coming alongside and giving communication and information, and Chandler's able to sit in on the Youth Safety Caucus meetings and then take that information back to the folks at Pennsylvania. And that really takes work and it takes time. And ultimately, as APJ is going to grow, we're really going to need more and more of that kind of time. And we're going to need more and more Chandlers. And so if this kind of work excites you and you'd like to see more of it, we'd love to have you contribute to what we're doing so that we can hire more people like Chandler to help us grow our work in more states and across issues. All right, so on that front, Joyce has a question. What's happening with funding? Thank you for that question, Joyce. I did have an update I wanted to give there. We have not yet gotten a grant for the video curriculum, and that probably would come mostly on CPJ's side because the curriculum itself can be funded through tax-deductible donations in a way that our direct advocacy work cannot be. But I did want to let you guys know that we do have a grant that we're sharing with CPJ for work that is really centered around paid leave. So that work's going to be primarily done in 2024. It might happen in the lame duck session of 2024, but we have a funder who's really interested in getting paid leave across the finish line. And so that APJ has a little bit of that money. CPJ has more. Rachel Anderson with the Families Valued Initiative and Maddie, our advocacy manager, have been working hard to build coalitions to reach out to especially particular lawmakers that we think might become advocates on this issue, or folks who we already know were advocates. I don't know how many of you remember, but paid leave was included in some versions of the Build Back Better bill that was passed in 2022, but it got dropped. So it's kind of low-hanging fruit for a lame duck session next year if we can do a lot of legwork in the meantime. So we do have some funding for that work, which is going to be ongoing, mostly behind the scenes. But probably towards the end of 2024, especially after the election, it'll probably be time to mobilize a lot of advocates around that issue. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for your time. If you are in a state and you haven't heard us mention your state tonight, please get in touch with us, because if there are a few of you in a state, we'd love to get you all together and start a coalition in your area. And glad to hear about the knee surgery for Christy. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, we are going to send out a recording that'll go out to all the participants today, and it'll go out in our newsletter in a few days. We'll send it out so you can watch and catch up. I really thank you guys for your time tonight. And if there aren't any final questions, we'll let you all have the rest of your evening. But thank you so much for joining us, as Maddie said, at the end of a long day in the middle of the week. Have a great night, everyone.